sooner. Things like science fiction or deep analyses of the human condition will come later. But I think that's going to happen before we can tackle humor, because once you have something that's able to kind of understand kind of a narrative arc, you kind of need to have that understanding before you can get kind of the benign violation, benevolent
benign
violation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic, but I think it's not going to happen in the 2020s.
And Nikhil, you ended your talk telling us
Yeah.
that you think that there's something innately human that
Right.
computers will never be able to capture.
So I think there's an important distinction to be made between like chess moves and playing Go, which is very much strategic, and literature, laughter, all these more humanities-based phenomena. Like a lot of those are more saturated in emotion than they are in logic, which is why I think literature, like you say, short stories, and then later down the line, even laughter, may never be able to be fully understood. And I think a key word there is fully, because like you said, any short story can be simplified to a narrative arc, sure. And I think an artificially intelligent system could potentially in the future be able to grasp that. But what makes something a good story, in my worldview, in my opinion, is that it has that certain human touch which isn't describable by a certain arc or a certain formula. And that's the same thing with laughter, I think, and with humor.
Happiness in the City. This is Barbara, and today we are meeting in this wonderful studio to talk about interesting things from the point of view of pursuit of happiness, because there's a lot of conversational engagement in matters from other points of view, like justice or fairness, or ideas of independence. But I chose to focus on the idea and the right to pursuit of happiness, which actually is a very ancient right, and it was included in the foundational system of the United States of America as right to pursuit of happiness. We have three foundational rights: right to liberty, right to life, and right to pursuit of happiness. Right to life means that we have a right to live, that no authority can just take it away from us. And it is a very powerful right because it created a relationship of trust between authority and citizens. If there's any legal system that tries to undermine this right to life, then there is no distrust, that there is no trust, there is distrust. And actually this is what the root problem of current problems in America is. It is lack of trust about matters of life. And life is not only biological breathing, but also supplies, resources for life, like food and dwelling and tranquility, so that a person can go through the day in a peaceful tranquility. And that has been undermined. And one of the ways that I try to remedy is by drawing our attention to matters of pursuit of happiness, right to pursuit of happiness, which can bring to light the problem that we have with how many laws undermine right to life. And I think that we should talk more about it. I'm going deeper and deeper into more contemporary dimensions of the right to life, but You can look at this right to life from the point of view of biblical teaching, teachings in many other religions. We all agree on one thing, that to be alive is good. It's a good thing. People rejoicing when a baby is born. People mourn when a person passes away. It is part of natural law, that appreciation of life, that life is precious. When you look at many videos today on social media, you see sometimes people put a video of a dog mourning passing of another dog, or the honor. So there's a deep respect for life in sentient beings. And when we become a political organization, we have to understand this and affirm it. And a lot of the legal thinking today is so disconnected from it, from life, that it started creating very strange laws. And those laws are undermining the very idea of tranquility. What is the price to be paid when the right to life is undermined? It's disease, illnesses, anxieties, people going into depression, and that is the root for why they search for ways to deal with this fear for their life. And we have to look into deeper issues, why the idea of rights that was so powerfully understood throughout centuries and throughout millennia was reduced to the concept of civil rights or human rights. Those are important rights, but why are we thinking about human right if there is no right to life? So right to life, right to liberty, and right to pursuit of happiness are foundational. Everything else is secondary, because if a person has no life, what's the point of worrying about civil rights? And we have to have returned to this foundational power and authority of right. Where did the founding fathers of America get the idea of foundational rights? From the idea of divine right. And that is a concept that is often misunderstood or not understood at all in many contemporary circles. It is understood in countries that have had history of kings and queens, because that idea of divine right is part of the genetic makeup. It is an idea that became part of daily life of ancestors, of royal powers, and it's just passed on from generation to generation through information encoded in our bloodlines. And it is very important to understand that we cannot alter it and have a healthy human being. So there are very powerful long-term forces of divine right, and then we have what people call in many countries karma, universal right, universal ways in which if divine law doesn't get the primacy, then universal right kicks in and no one can control that. This is a very powerful law of karma, and you cannot discuss with it, you cannot negotiate with this, you cannot have democratic relationships with this. It's just a law that comes in when divine right is ignored. Then we have natural law, you cannot alter that without causing illness, disease, and all kinds of damage. And then we have civil law, which is at the bottom, and it's supposed to understand and be aligned with the defining ways in which we are created. Some people choose to be ignoring this, and then all kinds of problems happen that can be easily avoided with knowledge about those important matters. And that leads me to the topic that I wanted to focus on, which is the understanding that comes from light. This relationship between divine right and divine light. Light means presence of energy that enlightens our minds and our existence, and it is very important for us to understand what is the difference between presence of light and lack of light, which is darkness, lack of ability to understand. So when we look at this definition, light here, the natural agent that stimulates sight and makes things visible, the light of the sun, and the synonyms here: illumination, brightness, luminescence, luminosity, shining, gleaming, gleam, brilliance, radiance, luster, growing, glow, blaze, glare, dazzle. And there's even more here, synonyms that are in our languages that help us understand. Here we have incandescence, phosphorescence, sunlight, moonlight, starlight, lamplight, firelight, electric light, gaslight, ray of light, shaft of light, beam of light, rare effulgence, refulgence, lambency, fulguration. The houses had only the shadowy light of candles and oil lamps. And we can also have, in this particular definition of the noun of light, daylight, light of day, natural light, sunlight, daylight hours, daytime, day, hours of sunlight. And we see here the wealth of the meaning of the word light, even just from the selection of words in this particular dictionary expression. So in this particular definition also we have an expression in someone's eyes indicating a particular emotion or mood. A shrewd light entered his eyes. So you see how powerful this definition is, and we need to think about it more, because if there is lack of light in our eyes and only darkness guides us, we'll not go very far. We'll not get things done in the right way. And this definition of light could be enriched by what I understand as divine light. And that is light that we can perceive through God's grace and through faith that light comes from kingdom of God. It's part of our ability to understand the concept of divine right. So we have a situation which countries have had that concept for thousands of years, and suddenly certain forces showed up and blocked it through darkness, and all kinds of strange wars developed. Primarily, I'm thinking here about European countries, Middle East. So the way to deal with different countries in the world must be very unique, must be looking into the individual way in which those countries developed. Because if someone would demand outcomes that can only come from divine illumination, in places that never experienced this, people would just be filled with anxiety. They would have no idea what to do. And on the other hand, to block it on countries that have had it for thousands of years is very cruel, because they can never feel happy. They can never feel together and fully alive, because they feel internally something was blocked in them. And then there's a clash between the heritage and what is being imposed on them by certain forces that want to organize their life without divine light. So we have to have understanding about this concept of light, and then we would be able to see what can be remedied by allowing the right light to come in to our eyes and to our interactions, and by not requiring divine light from places that never experienced it, that they don't know yet what it is, though they may learn about it and accept it. So we have to be very sophisticated in the very way of visibility. What is visible and what is not visible? What should be visible, what should be not visible? So the concept of light and visibility are connected, because something that is darkness cannot be visible by definition. That means darkness means lack of visibility. That's what the night is. And I think that we have to somehow develop ways to talk about it in social media, in other kinds of media, because there's a lot of conflict today in the world that is not because people did something wrong or are guilty, but because of lack of light, lack of connection through visibility. And I think that we have to try to regain presence of divine life, and divine life comes through divine light when we see what it is and what it is not. Those things were normal in Europe, in France. We have a very famous king, Louis XIV, called Sun King, because his radiance, his being was filled with divine light and divine life, and that created tremendous presence of God in France. There are all kinds of books written about it. I encourage you to read. there are Byzantine emperors, Roman emperors. There's this presence of divine light throughout Europe. In Poland, the presence of divine light is so powerful that when atheism tried to crush it after World War II, that Roman divine light crushed communism. Within one generation. It didn't last even more than one generation. It couldn't be sustained because that light in Poland is so powerful. More than 1,000 years of Roman Empire tradition of connecting to God through search and respect of divine light. Russia went through a horrible revolution, but eventually recovered from that atheism and returned to divine light. Middle East in Arab countries never lost it. It's really a miracle. It's something that I admire in Middle East, how those amazing people have been able to endure what they had to go through and keep the divine light and divine life. When you look at countries like Japan, when you look at China, you cannot understand China without understanding that the spirit is imperial. No matter what happened in the civil rule of Chinese way of life, the spirit never lost connection to God. It's spirit that hasn't been baptized like national spirits in Europe, but does obey God. It's spirit that understands that God is the one guiding it. We have a situation, similar situation in India, in many other places, and you cannot understand the way to receive light of world peace if you ignore it, because the atheistic way of looking at world peace is very limited, doesn't have much energy. It's primarily through voices of people who promote it, whereas divine light, aligned with individual traditions, has unlimited power from Kingdom of God. So it comes also with love and with wisdom. So in order to have world peace, we have to come back to that notion of glowing light that will come to our eyes from divine light and show us how to see each other through that beautiful, loving energy. And that's world peace. Because when people look at each other through loving eyes, then they want to be friends. They want to do things together, or they just want to live in tranquility and let other people live in tranquility. So it can transform the way we relate to each other in a similar way that internet transformed international relationships. So it's something that is desirable, something that is good, and we should look to be connected with. And in closing, I would like to address one very important issue connected with this. When people connect to divine light, it also comes with way to look at the space in a loving way. So then we can create connections with everybody that is within our reach and that is within our lives in ways that align and harmonize with them. And that means that people start respecting each other's lives, and they naturally connect to the right of life as mutually beneficial. So instead of blocking each other, people start accepting each other and being with each other, because the light from all the parties involved brings divine life and divine love. So I think this is a much better way to organize international relationships than what we have right now, which is strife, wars, anger, rages, people trying to cut corners, people scheming each other from many things, people taking over each other's houses, not respecting families, and just creating this scary atmosphere of control and fear for life. Whereas when we have divine light that comes with God's blessing, this can be completely transformed to something beautiful and noble and chivalric, in which people affirm each other's presence, in which loving affection is expressed, and people rejoice in the fact that life can flow beautifully. And then there is no fear for life, because there is a sense of trust restored. And that is ultimate security, which we should get and treasure.